For many years, the United Kingdom was known as one of the most open societies in Europe. It was a country that spoke proudly about welcome, fairness, and shared growth. Immigration was discussed openly. It was debated, questioned, and sometimes criticized, but it was never treated as a threat to the nation itself. People believed that migration made Britain stronger, richer, and more connected to the world. That belief shaped politics, media, and public life for decades. Then something changed almost overnight. The language shifted. The words became harder. The tone became sharper. Immigration stopped being described as an opportunity and started being described as a problem that needed control. New laws appeared. New limits were announced. New warnings were issued. A country that once defended immigration as both a moral duty and an economic need began talking about enforcement, removal, and closing doors. This was not a protest movement. It was not the political fringe. This shift came from the center of power itself. By the end, Britain announced the toughest immigration crackdown in half a century. Fewer arrivals, stricter rules, longer waits, fewer rights. On paper, it sounded like order and control. In reality, it revealed something deeper: fear, pressure, and a serious loss of trust between the public and the state. Why did the United Kingdom change so fast? What forced a country with such a long tradition of openness to declare war on immigration? Stay with us until the end, because the answer is not simple, and the real story goes much deeper than headlines and politics. To understand the sudden shift, we have to go back to a time when the system still seemed to work, in the years before everything began to fracture. Britain had what many believed was a successful immigration model. During the 1990s and early years that followed, the country absorbed large numbers of new workers without major conflict. Many came from nearby European countries. They found jobs quickly. They paid taxes. They filled gaps in the labor market. Life continued. Growth continued. Immigration was seen as a contribution, not a burden. For a while, this balance held. The economy was growing. Public services were under pressure, but not overwhelmed. Housing was tight, but still reachable for many. Wages were rising slowly. The system was not perfect, but it felt manageable. People believed that the government knew what it was doing, that confidence mattered. More than most realized, the first real crack appeared when Europe expanded eastward. Britain made a decision that few other countries took at the time. It opened its labor market immediately, without delay or limits. Workers arrived in large numbers. The economy benefited, but something else happened at the same time. Began to build. Housing demand increased faster than supply. Schools became more crowded. Doctors' appointments became harder to get. Waiting lists grew. None of this collapsed overnight. Instead, it accumulated quietly year after year. It's like weight slowly added to a structure never designed to carry it. In response, political leaders made promises, said immigration would be reduced. They set targets. They spoke about control. But the numbers never matched the words. Each year, immigration stayed far above what was promised. Each year, the gap between expectation and reality widened. That gap damaged trust. People did not just feel ignored. They felt misled. And once trust breaks, it does not return easily. When the vote to leave the European Union arrived, many believed it would fix this problem. For millions, it was not mainly about trade or laws. It was about control. The belief was simple: leave the system, regain the borders, restore order. But what followed surprised almost everyone. Migration from Europe fell, but total immigration did not. In fact, it increased. New flows came from different regions. The system became more complex, not simpler. At the same time, cooperation with neighboring countries weakened. Returns became harder. Processing slowed. Britain began to look like a place where staying was easier than leaving. This outcome did not just disappoint voters. It deepened the feeling that the state no longer had control. At the same time, a much deeper problem was unfolding beneath the surface. The British economy was slowing down. For years, growth had been weak. Productivity barely moved. Wages stopped rising in real terms. Life became more expensive, but incomes did not keep up. After a major financial shock, the country never fully recovered its momentum. Public services felt the strain first. The welfare system was built for a country that produced more each year. It assumed rising wealth. It assumed expanding opportunity. But those conditions no longer existed, yet the system kept running as if they did. In that environment, immigration became an amplifier. It did not create the problem on its own, but it made every weakness more visible. When growth slows, competition feels sharper. When housing is scarce, every new arrival feels personal. When hospitals struggle, patience disappears. This is where the debate stopped being abstract. Immigration was no longer about numbers on paper. It became something people experienced in daily life, in crowded classrooms, in long hospital waits, in rising rents, in neighborhoods changing faster than anyone expected. For years, Britain assumed integration would happen naturally. People would learn the language, communities would mix. Time would solve the problem. That assumption only works when change is slow. When entire areas grow faster than the country's ability to integrate them, separation appears. Parallel lives form, social contact shrinks. Trust weakens in many places. People began to feel like strangers in their own neighborhoods. Not because of hatred, but because shared space disappeared. Shops changed, schools changed, social rules felt different. The sense of common ground faded. At the same time, transparency vanished. The government avoided difficult conversations. Data was limited. Questions were deflected. This silence created suspicion. People assumed information was being hidden. Whether that was true or not mattered less than the feeling it created. Once fear fills a gap left by silence, it spreads quickly. Politics responded, as it always does. A new voice emerged, speaking clearly and without hesitation. It did not promise balance. It promised force, control, limits. Suddenly, a movement once seen as marginal surged into the center of debate. Polls shifted. Traditional parties panicked. The message was clear. If the government did not act, it would be replaced. This is where the real turning point arrived. The shift was not driven by belief. It was driven by survival. A government rooted in traditions of openness adopted policies that reversed decades of thinking. Immigration was no longer framed as a shared benefit. It was reframed as a test of loyalty, contribution, patience. The system was redesigned from the ground up. Staying in the country was no longer about time. It was about proof. Proof of work, proof of language, proof of value. Access to support was cut back sharply. Housing help became rare. Welfare support was restricted. Temporary status replaced long-term security. The asylum system changed as well. Protection was no longer permanent. It became conditional, renewed again and again. Safety could be withdrawn. Stability became uncertain by design. Even irregular arrivals faced extreme limits, long waits, no guarantees. A clear signal that this route was no longer welcome. These changes had a clear goal: discourage low-skilled migration, favor high-skilled workers, prevent permanent settlement without contribution, restore the sense that the system is controlled. But here is the deeper truth. Immigration reform alone cannot fix what is broken. The economy still struggles. Productivity remains weak. Without better wages and stronger growth, pressure will return. Limits can slow arrivals, but they cannot rebuild prosperity. The labor market still depends on foreign workers. Care work, health services, agriculture, and logistics rely on people willing to do difficult jobs for low pay. Without reform, shortages will appear. Housing remains scarce. Fewer arrivals do not create new homes. Years of underbuilding cannot be reversed by policy alone. Public services remain strained. An aging population, staff shortages, and outdated systems continue to push hospitals and schools to the edge. This is why the outcome remains uncertain. If people do not feel real improvement in daily life, frustration will not fade. Britain is really facing is not just an immigration question. It is an identity crisis in a world that no longer feels stable. For years, events slipped out of control. Economic shocks, political breaks, health emergencies. Each one weakened trust. Immigration became the place where all that loss of control became visible. This crackdown is an attempt to take something back, not just borders, but confidence. Whether it works or not remains unknown. What is certain is that the United Kingdom has entered a new phase. Immigration is no longer a side issue. It sits at the center of national life. The future will be shaped not only by who arrives, but by whether the country can rebuild growth, trust, and shared purpose. That is the real question. If this breakdown helped you understand what is really happening beneath the headlines, support this work by subscribing and join us for the next deep analysis.